people need to understand, like, when you are left alone in life, Scott never falters. It is there for you. It is at the forefront of everything. All right.
Somebody hit somebody!
Welcome to this week's episode of the Pit Therapy Podcast. I am Kyle, and we are here with Trevor. Do you think people get tired of our stupid introduction like that? Maybe we need to come up with something better.
I mean, I don't know. I always listen to podcasts, and the majority of podcasts do an introduction like that. There's probably something better to do, but who knows?
Okay.
If it's your first time here, welcome.
If you're still listening to us, welcome too.
That's right. Not sure why you're here, but thank you.
Yeah. So, how you doing, man?
Dude, good. It was a busy weekend. I was in San Diego. A whale's
vagina.
Yeah. Yes. I don't believe that's what that means. Anyway, I had a business trip out there. So I flew out on Sunday, was there on Monday, and then I came home Tuesday. And so just really quick, but I don't know, man. It's interesting. It's fun. We talked with Mark and Rob of Time Heist about being at work events and being sober and everyone else not being sober. So, yeah.
I always think
makes for a good time.
I always think of the Stanley Severs video, you know, where he's talking about breaking edge and how he told his boss, and his boss was like, "I don't know what that is."
Right.
And I'm always just sitting there thinking about, like, it's just stupid, but whatever, you know. But I'm always just like thinking about that, and I'm just like, these guys, even if you explain it to them, they're gonna be like, "This kid's an idiot." Well, that's cool, man. San Diego's cool. It finally started warming up here. I was gonna say I was jealous of you going there, but then it was like 75 degrees today, and I was like, nah, like, feels good here too. So.
Dude, it was perfect weather down there, though. It was so nice.
Yeah. San Diego's sweet. It's a cool town. I like it.
We stayed like right on the bay too. So it's so pretty walking out the ocean right there.
I just remember our trip in high school because we went down to San Diego.
Yep.
We went to like SeaWorld and stuff.
We did SeaWorld, we did Old Town, and then we did the tide pools. Right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Dude, that was such a fun trip. I think about that trip every now and then. It was a good time.
Right. So. There's some things that happened on that trip that probably can't be said.
Really? I can't think of any.
I mean, besides like saving the life of kids almost falling out of windows.
Yeah. Whoever that kid is, Cameron, if you're listening, which I can guarantee you're not, you still owe me, dude, because I saved your life. So
there was that, scaring other kids butt ass naked.
You remember? Because I think I brought that like stupid ninja outfit that I had, and I was running down the hall, and I can't remember who it was at the hotel, and like someone tripped me, and I did this like perfect ninja like roll, and it was, dude, all those years of training paid off. Man. In that moment.
All those years of us trying to do 2-man cartwheels and stuff.
Yeah. Good times, dude. Good times. So anyways, dude, I'm playing in this like old man basketball league.
Yeah.
Well, it's not old man. It's like just a normal basketball league, but the team that I'm on is full of old people. And this team we played against put up 110 points on us. We lost by 60. Yeah. It was bad.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Just when you think you're like starting to make it in life, you know, you play basketball against a bunch of kids that are in shape. So
just get stomped.
Yeah. But it was a good time. So yeah. What do you got? New music, new tours?
Tons of new music that's not out that we've had sneak peeks of. And I'm freaking pumped, man. We've been sent some stuff that I'm like very excited for everyone else to be able to hear. So keep your eyes peeled for all of that.
I think there's a lot of older guys that are just like, not that the kids aren't doing it, but these older guys are like it's time to come back. You know what I mean? Like, because we like Die Young's
Yeah.
released a couple songs, and we were fortunate enough to get a little bit of a sneak peek to what
Yeah.
they're releasing, and it's just like it's a different sound. We even talked about this with Daniel, right? It's a
Yeah.
different sound than what kids are playing today. But I think a lot of these guys are like, you know what? It's time. Like it's time that we come back. I mean, Heavy is the Head. We talked about them. We met with
Yep.
Kendall.
Yeah.
And he's a little older too, right? I mean, pretty sure he's our age or a
Yeah.
little older,
Yeah.
but their single was freaking insane. I don't think we
They've got
talked about
one
it.
dropping real soon too.
Yeah.
Another single.
So I mean, I'm a big fan of these guys, both of them, Die Young and
Right.
Heavy's the Head. Just I cannot wait for their EPs to drop. So
Right. Then we caught a little bit of Absolved. That
that's
new
right.
stuff gonna be fantastic again. Time Heist hooked us up. Like,
It was good.
dude,
Yeah,
there's
there's so
so
much good
much
stuff.
good. And most of it's EPs. Quick, easy, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, you can screw
Did he?
off.
Are you telling me you wouldn't take a full length of any of these bands?
I absolutely would, but the way that these small EPs, 3 to 5 songs, are like structured, they've all done very, very well on how they've built them out in the minimal capacity that they've done them, you know?
Yeah.
So like we talked about this with Gabe on of Darasum, where like the albums that literally just feel seamless are just they're so fun. And one of those, like the Angry Brigade, when we were listening to Darasum, I thought Thriving on the Divide was my favorite. But the way that like Spotify and stuff just breaks it up, even for a second, the Angry Brigade doesn't flow the same as it does on their CD.
Mm,
I put the Angry Brigade in my car, and dude, it's just so good. It's so good how it all goes together and everything. And that's how I feel like almost all of these little glimpses we've had have been. It just
yeah.
flows so good together.
Yeah. Not I'm
So I'm
super
stoked for
excited.
that.
So
And
Anxious
then
dropped
yeah,
a new album. I actually really liked it. Um, I like
I've listened to a
Anxious.
couple songs. I haven't heard the
So
whole thing, but I've listened to a few songs.
yeah,
It's
it's
good.
cool. Maybe it's not as good as their last one, but still good. I really like it. And then you sent me over that Domain, some of the
Dude,
new Domain songs.
that's what I was just going to talk about.
Stuff's
Whatever
nasty.
freaking Florida's doing, man, so freaking good.
Yeah,
Again, it's 3 songs, but those 3 songs just go hard
yeah.
and it's so sick. It's that fast, kind of thrashy. Ah, I love it. It's
It's
awesome.
really good. They're really
And
good.
then Forever War just dropped. It's like the second of their EP, so it's another 3 song EP. So
Mm,
they recorded 6 songs total. They released one earlier, like a month ago. They just dropped the second part of it, another 3 songs. They just played last night with Time Heist. I got there a little bit late. I'm super bummed. I only got to catch Firestarter, which, dude, Firestarter's sick. Like
yeah,
this old, like 80s, 90s youth crew or just old school hardcore and stuff that's coming back. It's such a sick sound.
yeah.
It's fun, dude.
That's
So
good. No,
I'm
yeah,
pumped.
yeah. Good stuff coming out. For tours, I don't really have anything new. I did want to touch a little bit on some of the Furnace Fest announcements, though.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's see. You've got what was it?
Yep.
Zao. I don't know
I
how
don't
you
know.
say it. Shoot, hold on.
ZAO.
Zao. I remember one time
ZAO.
I said Zao, and Chris, our buddy Chris, got mad at me.
I know.
So, but then again, it's Chris. He
Whatever.
gets mad at me about a lot of stuff. So, let's see. Hold on, I'm trying to pull up the Tony Danza tap dance
Tony
extravaganza.
Danza, Tap Dance Extravaganza. I
Yeah.
mean, from that band alone, with Joshua Travis on guitar in there, if it's Joshua Travis who's going to be playing, you could easily pull a Glass Cloud reunion.
Yeah.
You could pull a Muir. My guess is a Muir will be there because of that. Uh, what was the other one he was in? I don't know, something else. But
So some of the other bands: Drain,
yep,
Secret World, A Change of Pace. There were a couple 10-yard fight. That would be
yeah.
sick. Speed.
Oh, Speed got announced.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
Speed's cool.
Well, okay, so did you see? It was like so Secret World got announced, and some media outlet put Speed's other band, and they commented and they said, "We're not Speed." But it's because there's like a couple of the Speed dudes in it or whatever. But that's
Yeah.
funny. So that's funny
No,
that Speed did get announced too.
yeah. So might as well. They're gonna come from Australia.
Oh,
So
100%. Yeah.
so these announcements are cool. You know, like if that was coming through town, I would go see it. I don't know that there's a 10-yard fight would be the closest thing that would make me want to fly out there again. So
Who was the other band? See, oh, what's the other one? There's another one on there. Read them all for me. I know Rolo Tomasi got
I
announced.
just closed it. So I don't
Well,
know.
screw you, bro.
I guess the point that I'm making though is it there yet for you to go again?
No,
Yeah.
it's not.
Same.
The one thing that I messaged you guys about though, oh, Haywire got announced. Crush Your Soul. Haywire and Crush Your Soul, they're super
Haywire
sick,
would be
both of
sick.
them.
Yeah.
Um, and then the one thing that I messaged you guys, so Tony Danza got announced, and then Rolo Tomasi got announced. I know the Chariot keeps saying they're not coming back, but you are putting a lot of chaotic bands. When I say a
Yeah.
lot, there's two, but right, but
Yeah.
two in the first like 10 that you announced, though, that's a lot. And so I'm saying there's a chance. The
I don't think it's
Chariot
happening.
might be at 2025 Furnace Fest.
If that happens, I mean, I will buy a ticket the day they announce it,
Right.
but I'm not holding my breath. Especially, dude, if they play the Shed,
Oh,
everyone
dude,
packed in there, it'd be incredible.
it would go off.
Yeah.
It would go off so hard. Uh, have you been keeping up with the Warp Tour announcements?
Dude, I looked through some of it today. I'm still not going.
Oh, 100%. I can't tell
Mean,
you how happy I am I'm not going. The
yeah.
lineups are horrendous. They're
Yeah.
horrendous. It's so bad to pay as much money as people paid without knowing the bands and to see the lineups that are coming out. It
Okay,
makes
but
sense,
a lot
but
of people that are spending the money on Warp Tour are going to be happy with the bands that are announced.
you've got a lot of variety. You got a lot of variety. Putting like big ass truck and stuff on there and like a few of those types of
I think
bands
those
with the
bands
other
are not
things.
going to have draw. Like, I don't think people are going to like them, and people will probably go see Tsunami because they're kind of mainstream now.
Yeah.
But I don't think Big Ass Truck's going to get a big pull. I mean, I hope they do, but I don't think they will because you're going to go to see 303 and you're going to walk over to Big Ass Truck. I don't know.
Right. Which we used to do, bro. Like that was
Not
the fun
303,
thing about
dude.
it. Or
No,
I mean
I'd
not
rather listen
303,
to somebody
but
plunger a butthole than listen to 303. So, yeah.
no. It's crazy. It's crazy how much money was spent. And then those are the lineups we're getting.
No. Yeah. It's not happening. So,
No.
but all right.
So
Well, I got nothing else tour music wise. Do you?
no, I've listened to a lot of Less Than Jake, so you know.
As have I, dude. So, I guess to segue into the band we're going to be talking about today. So, me and Trevor have been floating around a couple ideas for not typical bands that I think we would talk about. Although I don't like ska is adjacent enough to hardcore that like it's cool,
Yeah.
you know? So, there's a couple other
Like
bands that I
if you
think
didn't listen to
maybe
ska when you were in junior high at the beginning of high school, like did you really have a childhood?
if
Come on, like
you
let's be honest.
can look me in the eyes and tell me that you can't sing the words to at least one ska song, I'm not going to believe you. Because it's like there's maybe a handful, like a handful of ska bands that you just automatically attach to. I don't think you. I understand if you're not like a full blown checkered shirt, bowling shoes ska fan. All right, like I get it. Okay, but you cannot, being an alternative music, look me in the eyes and tell me you did not gravitate to at least one ska band, whether that's Less Than Jake, Real Big Fish, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Big D and the Kids Table. I mean,
Streetlight Manifesto.
Streetlight Manifesto. Freaking Aquabats, dude. Like,
right.
There's tons of them, right? I promise you, anyone in this music is at least attached to one of those.
So, right. I threw that out there just on our story, and Ill Will threw out Link 80. Yeah. And dude, that's like straight up East Bay hardcore with horns.
Yeah.
And so like that's another big one, man. Like if you didn't like the cheesy kind of poppy sounding stuff, you had the Link 80s. There was stuff that had horns in it that was still ska, right? You could even go into like the more punk stuff, the Rancids, the Operation Ivy's, things like that, right? Like there's definitely like harder, more punk influence where like maybe some like the Less Than Jakes, the Real Big Fish and stuff, they go on that more poppy side of punk, So like there's a huge variety in here, but it all has the same underlying tone, right? There's very specific things that make it ska.
So if you are going to try and lie to me and say that you don't like ska, because everyone does, whether you admit it or not, everyone does. If you think you're too cool for it, there's a band now today, like a current band that's called Omnigon, and they are like a faster, heavier, like Link 80 type ska band, right?
Okay.
The singer was doing security for another concert and ran into, I want to say it was the vocalist of Earth Crisis.
Oh, sick.
And the vocalist of Earth Crisis was like, dude, like you're Omnigon. I love ska. So if Earth Crisis can like ska, so can you. All right. Like you're not too tough for ska music. All right. I'm going to just make that clear. Okay.
100%.
Anyways, now that I've gone off my soapbox on that, because it gets so much hate, man. Like, I don't know. Like everybody loved like 90s and early 2000s high school movies that had ska songs on it. Everybody loves, here's a deep cut for you. Everybody loves the intro to America's Funniest Home Videos. It's a ska song. Yeah.
And if you weren't a movie watcher or TV show watcher, you were probably playing video games. What was your favorite Tony Hawk song?
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee 9 out of 10 people would say Superman. From Goldfinger.
Exactly.
Like you like ska. Just admit it. It's time to admit it.
It is. So, all right. So we're talking about Less Than Jake. One thing I wanted to do, this is something new that I'm going to try. So if people like it, let me know, because I think it'd be interesting to maybe do a little more stuff like this. But I had read a few things about ska music and realized that I don't really know that much about it. So I wanted to spend a few minutes right now and just kind of go through what I understand and what I learned from my very stupid, elementary school level research abilities on the history of ska music. So if I say anything that is historically incorrect, I apologize. I am not a scholar. I have been hit in the head at hardcore shows way too many times to be able to do this scholarly. But I will do my best. I learned a ton. I think you and I were texting a little bit about this, right?
Yeah.
What was your knowledge of the history of ska? So from what I understand, the official date that people say that this thing was created was 1959.
Yeah.
Did you have any clue that it was that old?
The answer that I would have is no. But here's the thing. I would have considered that 1959 music, island music. You know what I mean? Because what I considered ska was what I grew up with.
Right.
It was the West and Jakes, the Real Big Fish, and stuff like that, which have the ska influences, but they are punk bands or rock
Right.
bands who use ska influence. So the actual ska undertone is what a lot of people would probably consider island music, you know? So it has a lot of those walking bass lines. It has a lot of those. Uh, it's on the offbeat
Mm-hmm.
strums and stuff like that. Like all that stuff.
Upstrom.
The upstrum, yeah, the offbeat. So, all that kind of stuff. You hear all of that. You listen to Caribbean music. You listen to Jamaican music. You listen to all that kind of stuff. So, I just, you were the one who introduced me to the waves of ska. But now that like it's put in that sense, like yeah, it makes complete sense. I just,
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have considered it. The weird one for me is the second wave of ska. So we need
Like
to
two
talk
tones.
about this.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. We will.
I want to
So,
go through a little bit of so a lot of people argue about how they break ska up. They don't really like calling it waves.
yeah,
I
screw
think it's
those people.
appropriate. Yeah, no, I think it's appropriate because it does sound sonically so different each time it kind of resurges. And I think people argue about this idea of like waves because they want to say that like, oh, well, it never died, right? It's like, yeah, that's fine. But when like 99.99% of the population doesn't listen to it or access it, when it does become more mainstream, it comes with a different sound and a different culture and stuff like that. So we're going to use waves. If you don't like that, it's fine. But that's just, I think, the easiest way that we can categorize it. So first wave ska is what you were saying. Originated in
Right.
Jamaica, 1959. It's crazy to think that genre-wise, this came before reggae music.
Right.
So it has it initially started because, people in Jamaica from their history had a lot of Caribbean, African musical influences, and then in this time period, they started to get access to the radio, and there were DJs in Jamaica that were playing radio stations from places like New Orleans. So it was very heavy jazz and like old school R&B
Sure.
influence.
Okay.
And so the invention of ska music was this, marriage of old school R&B jazz with Caribbean African influenced music.
So that's where you're going to get the horns and stuff from is going to be that jazz, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, um, some of the original ones. So there's a really famous one that started it called the Scotalites.
Yeah.
And then the other one was Brian Lee and the Dragonaires, and that one's probably Brian Lee and the Dragonaires probably have the most famous ska song because they say like it's the Jamaican ska, and I think I sent you
Sure.
the documentary from like
Yes.
1965 or something like that, where they're showing people. What's interesting too is the term skanking actually came from this time. So
Yeah.
people that were dancing to ska music back in like the late 50s, early 60s was actually called skanking, which I think is incredible because I always assumed that was just like a modern term for dancing to this music.
It's funny that you say that you're talking about kind of the most famous song because they literally, I'm trying to remember which was the one that you sent me. It's almost like the hokey pokey. They teach you how to
Yeah.
skate. Like the lyrics are how to dance to the music.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a funny thing. So if you're ever curious about how to skank, I need to look up which song it actually was.
Yeah, I can't remember the song name, but the video is hilarious because
Jamaica Ska, I'm pretty sure is what it was.
yeah, I think it is. I
The
think it is.
Brian Lee one.
And so the video, so if anyone's interested, go to YouTube and look up This Is Ska. It's a black and white documentary from like the mid 60s. And they show people dancing to it. And what's funny is they're like swinging their arms, and then they're
Yeah.
like pelvic thrusting and stuff. And I'm like,
Right.
dude, I could dance like that. Heck yeah. It was great. So
Yeah.
I sent you a couple first wave ska songs. Any other comments on that? It's a lot less like horn based instrumental than we're used to. It's very much what you would assume reggae is to what we know today, right?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit more upbeat. It gets that horns and it gets the offbeat. Like I said, if you listen to this, you would really think just island music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like that's how it feels. Like
I
just
w-
yeah,
I
everyone
would
knows
like
what
to
island music
know.
is.
I would like to know if people genuinely like and still listen to first wave ska.
Oh, I guarantee. But I don't know if it's going to be like people in our generation. Cuz like that's something that when my grandparents were alive, I could have turned that on and they would have been fine with something like that. So
Yeah.
it's going to be the older generation, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not offensive at all. It feels like you're on a boat. It feels like you're going on a cruise, you know?
Yeah.
Honestly, if you go on a cruise and you end up in a port, this is the music you're going to hear walking down the port.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah, probably. So, all right. So fast forward like maybe 10 years, I think that reggae starts to really make its like statement in Jamaica and the Caribbean in like the mid to late 60s is what I read.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the like influence from island music maybe starts to get more involved with reggae and less into ska music. But what happens in the global climate of things is there's lots of Jamaican and Caribbean immigrants that go to the UK, right? Especially like certain places in the London area. At that time in the UK, this is like mid 60s, late 60s, early 70s, right? There's a lot of like political upheaval, a lot of people protesting, a lot of racial issues at the time. Um, you had really poor white guys from England that are getting very involved in the punk scene, right? Because this is like prime punk time in the UK, you know?
Yeah.
You start to get a lot of these guys that mix with like poor immigrant Caribbean people that have
Sure.
brought over this like first wave, first generation ska music, and it starts to mingle together.
Yeah.
And so what's really cool is that like you get this amalgamation of these two cultures that started to mix really, really well. You had all these like subcultures start coming out, like Rude Boys, these guys that were into ska music that would dress like really, really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where this idea for like ska music, that people that dress the way they do with like the fedoras and the suspenders, is because this is what they were dressing like as Rude Boys in the 70s in Britain when the second wave of ska starts to come out.
Yeah.
What's cool about this is all these second wave ska bands, they're incredibly political. They're very anti-racist, anti-establishment, just like you would get from punk music, but it's got this island, reggae-ish ska feel to it. And so um, the second wave is also referred to as two-tone. One
Yeah.
of the record labels at the time was called Two Tone, and they were the ones that were pumping out all these ska bands in the UK. And so they just kind of referred to it as Two Tone. It's not as very much influenced with horn instruments. It's very like rancid type sounding ska music. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
So this is what I found interesting though. In addition to the punk influences, right? You also had a heavy influence of Britpop going on at that time. And
Yeah.
the song that popped up that I was like, that's not a ska song. And then I listened to it and you're like, oh, there's totally ska influence there, is Our House by Madness. Do you know
Okay.
what song I'm talking about?
Yeah, 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 I do.
Our house in the
Uh,
middle of our street. Like,
yeah,
go listen to that. It's on the offbeat. It has all of the stuff with it, but it's to a Brit dance pop backing. And so it is like the way that like ska permeated through some of this stuff, just with like the off timings and a few things like that, or the upbeats. It's just super interesting because like I said, I would never have thought of Our House being a ska song
right,
until you start like listening for those key aspects. And like one of the big key aspects is the walking bass line.
right.
So like that's something we're going to talk about with Less Than Jake because their bass work
It's awesome.
insane. It's
Yeah,
insane. But you get that on songs like this. You get the walking bass like da dum ba dum da
uh-huh.
dum. Like it just all happens.
Yeah.
I I don't know, dude. I love it, man. It's
So
like it's fun.
I actually like really enjoyed listening to the second like two-tone ska.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a couple modern bands that I think do it really well. I've talked before about Bad Operation. I feel
yeah.
like they have a very two-tony ska sound, second wave ska sound.
Okay.
It's really great. One thing that I thought was funny. Do you remember like when Barbie and Oppenheimer came out? Was that last year or the year before?
Barbenheimer. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you remember the memes that was like half of it was Barbie and the other half was Oppenheimer?
yeah.
And I
Barbenheimer.
guess
That's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
I saw this meme that was like, what type of music is like this? And somebody was like two-tone ska music because it sounds like Barbie, but lyrically it's Oppenheimer. And I'm like, dude, that's like if you read the lyrics of a lot of these two-tone second wave ska bands, it's like very politically motivated, very
That's
punk influenced
very valid.
lyrically,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the music is like this super upbeat fun. Like you just want to like bop to it, and it's
Right.
just, I don't know. It's awesome. Like, I think that's incredible.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, going along with that, as we get into Less Than Jake, all my friends are metalheads. Like, I was like flipping through and I decided to look up reaction videos to Less Than Jake. So people who had never heard them, who were listening to them for the first time. And I found this black dude who was listening to Less Than Jake for the first time. And it talked about like you have that opening intro where he's like, we shouldn't judge people by the color of their skins any
yeah,
more than we say that all teenagers are drunken dope addicts and glue sniffers kind of thing. And he paused it. He's like, we're solving racial inequality with this song right now. Like,
dude, ska. Seriously, that was like the premise of two tone ska was
yeah,
building a bridge,
yeah,
for that stuff, and it's
exactly.
awesome. One thing that I think is cool, and it just popped in my head, and I know we got to get moving on stuff, but it's kind of funny to think that like while you have like, I mean, this is the time that you get all the like really like old school punk bands, like this is Ramones, Sex Pistols, all that stuff. You also have all the like huge influence of like rock music, like you got the
Yeah,
Rolling Stones going on right now. You have all the like, you know, the Who, like all those old
yeah,
school
yeah.
rock bands, but it's like, who knew that like ska was still in the background of all this, like thriving? And I just love it because growing up, like my dad was a huge like rock person, right? But I'm sitting here thinking, looking at this now, like, man, this is like 1970. This is the 70s. Like that type of rock music is huge, but like ska's there. Ska
Yeah.
will never die. It's always there, whether you want it or not.
Sure, sure.
So, all right.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, you start getting into like the 80s and 90s, and we move into third wave.
And this is
So,
what most people, our generation, know as ska,
right.
right? So this is going to be like if you didn't know the history of like the island music and stuff like that, and you just heard a band on the radio, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, the Real Big Fishes, the Less Than Jakes, this is that wave.
Yeah. And this is where ska really starts to, I guess, explore integrating other parts of other genres, right? Because you get a lot faster ska punk, which again, if you listen to some of the Less Than Jake songs, they go from like what you would hear on the radio to like kind of gimmicky ska music that everyone makes fun of. But you listen to like their older albums or even on some of their newer albums, they have a couple songs that are like very, very punk influenced.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So it's
But
like,
even at this time, the like punk bands are taking influence from skas as well. Like we already mentioned, you have the Rancids, the No Effects, all of those kind of stuff. They're not necessarily throwing the horns in there,
right.
but they have very ska riffs in there.
Yeah.
You hear the ska riffs
I
on
mean,
their guitar work.
Time Bomb from Rancid is basically a two-tone ska song,
Right.
you know?
Right.
What's interesting though is like you get a lot of different influences in the US towards the end of the second wave and now into like the third wave. Bands like Operation Ivy, Bim Scala Bim out in like New England area. Like I guess New England has like a huge ska scene. And
Interesting.
so that's where like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones come from.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
They're from
That
that.
makes
And,
sense.
and even then, like if you listen to like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones compared to like an Operation Ivy, like you can absolutely hear the difference, right? Like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones might be like a lot more horn influenced
Right.
musically, whereas Operation Ivy sounds a lot more two tony. But even bands like No Doubt, Rancid, Sublime, even
Right.
credit their sound to Operation Ivy, which is like the beginning of a third wave
Right.
ska
And that's
sound.
coming from, like, the California side of things. So this is
Yeah,
where, like, hardcore, punk, all that kinda stuff, you find these pockets where everyone's pulling from the same general idea, but they're very different sounds. So you do have that kinda California feel
yeah,
from, like, the Sublimes, the No Doubts, the Operation Ivies, those kind of bands, but then, like you said, you go back east, there was probably a lot more jazz happening back east, right? And so
yeah,
you have a lot more horns and things like that. That's where the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones are pulling from, right?
sure.
You go down to Florida and it's kind of a mix of everything because you're on the beach in Florida, but you're
Very
East Coast
island
kind of thing.
influence, right?
So
Like, there's
yeah,
a
yeah,
one of my favorite, like, ska bands in the last, like, 10 years or so is this band called The Inevitables from Florida, and they have a couple, like, reggae dub songs that are
interesting.
awesome.
Yeah,
And so, like, it's cool that, like, ska, like, we were talking about this, and I promise we're gonna get into Less Than Jake, but I feel like this is pretty interesting stuff learning about the history of ska music because everyone talks crap on it, but it's actually a really rich, cool history. Um, I forgot what I was gonna say. Well, shut up, Trevor.
that wasn't me, bro. I was listening to your train of thought.
Yeah, well, guess what? Just
Okay,
yeah,
so here's my question though. So do do people attribute the third wave to the US? Because like we talk about the first wave being island, the second wave moves towards Brit. Is the
yeah.
third wave essentially US?
That's kind of the understanding I got, was that,
Okay.
like, the end of the second wave starts to move into the US, right?
So here's my question. We take things and we make it our own. We're those people in the United
Sure.
States.
Yeah.
Do you think, and this obviously is purely opinion based, that the island people and the Europeans think that our wave of ska is just bastardization of their music? Because
I
like, do you like the influence is there, but it is pop punk, it is
yeah.
rock music.
So,
There's the influences there, but it's not what it was supposed to
yeah.
be.
I don't think ska music is big enough to say yes to that. Like, I don't think there's enough people that are like, "Oh, the stupid Yankees ruined ska music." Especially because, like, ska, like, island influence into ska seems like it stopped after the first wave. And
Sure,
I mean, when you think of island music, you don't think ska music, even though it was before reggae. You think reggae.
sure,
And not even,
yeah.
that's just Caribbean, right?
Well,
Like
you start to get like island music in my mind is the steel drums. Like that's
sure.
what I hear when I think
Right.
island music. You
See,
know what
a
I
lot of
mean?
that stuff, like, has influenced tons of music because you look at, like, Latin music. Like, if you
Yeah, yeah,
listen to,
yeah.
like, a lot of Latin music is very influenced by this kind of stuff too, and
100%. Yeah,
there are a couple great ska bands that have come out of Latin America, and they even
sure,
say, like, ska to people in Latin America is just like Latin music with a little bit faster guitars, and
makes
it's
sense.
kind of true. And so I don't think anybody has said, like, "Oh, well, these guys, like, took ska and ruined it." I don't know that ska would have evolved if it wasn't for that. And maybe that's
Yeah.
a stupid American opinion, right? But,
Well,
like, I don't think it would have survived because it didn't survive
the
in.
only reason I say that is just because when I was looking up stuff about Less Than Jake, and people said, "Well, what kind of music is Less Than Jake?" Or it was like, "Is Less Than Jake ska?" They and obviously these are genre police, right? They're like,
Yeah,
they're not ska. They are pop punk music with ska influences,
yeah.
and it was just like, okay, like
If you're one of the, like, 5 people in the world that are, like, ska purists, like, sure, anything after 1960 is probably, like,
sure,
a
yeah,
bastardization of ska. Like,
exactly.
you probably don't like two-tone ska either because second wave ska doesn't really sound that much like first wave ska,
That's true.
you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, yeah,
That's where the
I don't
punk
know.
creeps in. So
Yeah, I guess if you wanna, like, compare that to, like, hardcore music, like, there's so much metalcore and hardcore now
oh
that
yeah.
it's like, but the reason why we categorize metalcore bands as hardcore is because metalcore as a genre is basically dead from what it was, right?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, from what it
Contention,
started as. Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
example, Contention's not a hardcore band; they're a metalcore band. but we're going to categorize them as a hardcore band because you can't categorize them as a metalcore band in 2024.
What current metalcore is doing, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, sure, have that take about ska. Doesn't change the fact that it's like great. And there's,
fair.
There's still a few bands that are kicking around with like a two-tone sound and stuff, but nobody's doing first wave ska, at least that I found. But all right.
Yeah. Okay.
That took 40 minutes. Sorry. I thought it was interesting. I feel like it gave me a better appreciation for Less Than Jake because they are the ska band for me. They've been around since like the mid 90s and literally they have like 15. I don't know how many albums they have. They have like 15 albums, something like that.
I appreciate you going through that.
Great, so
we only need to talk about one album. We'll talk about them all, but we only need to talk about one.
We need to talk about two albums.
You know what? Listen, I enjoyed the other one. It's a great album. It's definitely up there in terms of the ska world, the third wave ska world. There's one album that will reign supreme.
Hello Rockview, right?
I mean, if we just want to get into it, yeah.
Well, look, all right. So, I mean, I feel like I've preached enough about ska, but so we're supposed to be talking about Less Than Jake today. I think I've made it clear I'm a big ska fan, have been most of my life. Less Than Jake's been one of my favorite bands when it comes to ska music. So, the band itself, I guess, technically formed in 1992, although they didn't really do anything Less Than Jake related till, what was it, 95, I think their first album comes out.
I think that was their EP, something like that. And then Pez Core's 96.
Things we don't understand.
Yeah.
So this is a band that's been around 30 years,
I mean, I was born in 91. They formed a year after I was born.
Yeah. I mean, they've been around forever. Yeah. So, like, respect to these guys. Generally, I think they've been pretty freaking consistent with their albums.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you could say, like, Hello Rockview is their best album. I don't think people would really argue with that. Some people might say Anthem. Hello Rockview, though, is arguably probably their best album. I listened to these guys because there were too many albums. Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 albums.
Well, so if you're actually just counting just albums, not EPs, all of that kind of stuff, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Uncharted is technically it's a long EP, but it's listed as an album. But 10 is where you're at in terms of full lengths. They did a lot of EP work and compilations. Yeah.
We're just going to say 15.
Okay.
They are incredibly consistent. And when I listen to these, because there's so many albums, I didn't have time to listen to each one all the way through. I just listened to the ones that I remembered. But I had it on shuffle for the past week or a few days. I couldn't tell you a bad song. I really couldn't. Some of the bands that we talk about, literally, I've listened to a few songs and I'm like, yeah, I could do without that one,
Yeah.
Or even there's a lot of bands we talk about that was whole albums that were yeah, we don't really care.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that with this, dude.
Yeah.
I listened to hours upon hours of Less Than Jake and I enjoyed every single minute of it. So
there's 2 albums in here, 2 and a third is on the line where what I think happened, I shouldn't say what I think happened. They feel like what would be expected of industry plant making ska music. It's very generic. It hits all the right things. It's produced very well. It doesn't have the same impact, the same lyrical content, that kind of stuff that the other albums have. So there's 2, maybe 3 kind of just duds. They're not bad. All the songs are still good, but it's very generic is the way I'd say it.
Which ones?
The worst, in my opinion, the one that does it the worst is See the Light, 2013.
Okay.
That's the one that it's hey, we got to put something out kind of thing. So they just wrote something quick. In with the Out Crowd is number 2. That
When
was
was that one?
2006. So that's their
Okay.
follow-up to Anthem. And
Okay.
Anthem, like you said, it was a banger. In with the Out Crowd did not do it for me. And the last one, and you might not like me for this, this is one that it teeters for me. I do think that they actually did better with this album. I enjoy this album more than those other two, but Silver Linings.
Okay.
Silver Linings it's one of those 3. And the
Huh.
only
I
reason I
actually
say
really like
that,
Silver Linings.
I don't mind it. I don't mind any of them. Like, let me make sure that's very clear. I don't mind any of them,
Yeah.
but then you listen to Uncharted after Silver Linings, and Uncharted is far superior to what Silver Linings was, in my opinion.
Okay.
I really like Uncharted. So,
Yeah. I mean, for a band that's been around for 30 years, like,
yeah, no, I mean, I'm and again, let me make it clear, they're not bad music. Like, if you
yeah, it's
like
good.
ska music, you will enjoy the songs, but they get generic. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
I
It's
mean,
what you would expect.
it's ska, man. Like, there's a formula for ska.
You say that, but you start listening to some of the stuff, even starting with Pezcore, and there's things
This
that are
course
just
so good.
super interesting that happen
Yeah.
on these albums. Johnny Quest thinks we're sellouts. That bass line in that song alone, and just like, what's
The
the
tempo
word I'm
change,
looking
like a
for?
third of the way through, is like so sick in that song.
Yeah, to start out just kind of with that horn, like slowly building up,
Uh-huh.
and then to go into the fast, like just you
Uh-huh.
know, like it just like
Yeah.
it catches you and it's interesting and it's entertaining. I don't feel like you ever got that on those 3 albums I was talking about, or if you did get it, it felt forced. It wasn't like it didn't feel as natural as these first
Yeah.
albums felt.
It definitely does feel like their later albums lean very heavy on the, I don't know how to put it. It feels like their first, I don't know, 4 albums, you can definitely hear the heavy punk influence. And some of these guys did side projects that were like very punk
Yeah.
as well, So they're fans of punk. A lot of their tours, I mean, they mostly toured with ska bands, but they also toured with a lot of punk bands. And so
Yeah.
I mean, ska is adjacent. Ska is part of the punk scene. Like,
Yeah.
but they didn't shy away from it. But their later stuff, it's like
It's
it's got
radio
to be just
rock.
getting old, right?
It's
Like,
radio rock with
yeah,
ska influences. That you lose that kind of punk. You lose kind of that pop feel even. And it turns
right.
into like a rock album. Like Goldfinger did this too.
So
Uh
one thing that I
yeah.
read was that a big influence or change, a big reason why the change of sound with third wave ska was the introduction of pop punk.
Okay.
Because I think
Yeah.
we used to look at ska as like a traditional punk meets reggae, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of like really popular, Real Big Fish type, Goldfinger type ska bands that made it really big was not traditional punk. It was actually pop punk mixed with reggae.
And
And I
I would
think that
actually
maybe changes your
wonder
perspective on it a little bit.
though how much ska influenced pop punk that we know today. Because there's a
Yeah.
lot of songs that you listen to on these 90s albums that you're like, you take the horns out of that and you just change up a couple of like maybe the drum patterns or something. It's just a straight pop punk song,
Yeah.
you know?
No, for sure.
So,
Yeah, for sure. So I thought that was a really interesting case. And I think you hear that a lot more on their later albums.
yeah.
Like Sound the Alarm, the song Bomb Drop. Like, you're right, dude. You take like the horn parts out of it and you're just listening to like a pop punk song. Now,
Yeah.
Bomb Drop is a sick song of theirs. I freaking love that. It's probably my favorite off of Sound the Alarm, but
Sure.
you can definitely hear it. And again, like,
Sure.
we love pop punk, and maybe that's why we're still okay with a lot of the Less Than Jake stuff, because
Oh,
they're
without
mixing
question.
sounds that we love even on their own.
Like when I got introduced to Less Than Jake, I got introduced to Less Than Jake, Rufio, Newfound
Mm,
Glory, Slick Shoes. was a band I
Oh
got
yeah.
introduced to. And then I was listening to stuff like the Dead Kennedys and stuff was
Yeah.
also mixed into that. So like think about that smorgasbord that I just put out there. It's a lot of pop punk, a lot of traditional punk with the
Yeah.
Dead Kennedys and stuff like that. And then you have the ska influence with the Less Than Jakes. Like,
Yeah.
so it's all very together for me, for
Yeah.
sure.
So let's get into it. Hello Rockview.
Okay.
Arguably, especially third wave. If you're going to be a purist, I would still put this album up against any ska album from any wave of ska music. I
Without
think this is
question.
one of the greatest ska albums of all time. So what
Without
draws you to
question.
this album? Why do you have such high opinions of it?
Well, so this was my first Less Than Jake album. Let me start with
Okay.
that. So that being said, right,
Did you
that
listen
right
to it
there,
after it released though? Because released in '98. You weren't listening to this in '98, were you?
it was pretty close.
Okay.
It was pretty close. It was probably 99 when I first heard this album. Because I remember I heard this album before I moved to Centerville by you. And I moved to Centerville in fourth grade.
Okay.
I was 8 years old when I moved. And so it was 99 that I heard this album. So I heard
Yeah.
this very early on.
Okay.
And so obviously I'm being introduced to pop punk. I'm being introduced to punk in general, different rock music and stuff like that. This album, the fast, the upbeat nature, again, there's ska music in movies and stuff. So it feels more accessible, right?
Yeah.
And so like, it was like, oh, I've heard that sound before.
Right.
And now I have an album of it. And so like, I don't know if I realized how impactful this album truly was until maybe the last 5 years. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
It has always been an album that I've always been able to go back to. And front to back, listen to the whole thing, sing 90% of it kind of thing. Like it just stuck with me.
Yeah. I did no, like I totally relate to that. I don't remember when I actually first listened to this album, but going back and listening to it, I mean, look, I've never really stopped listening to these guys, whether I've admitted it or not. I know all the words to all these songs on Hello
Right.
Rockview and to Anthem because I think that's the other incredible album. But just even after all these years, dude, 1998, like 1998, you know,
Yeah.
and you still put this. I mean, the sound quality even like still sounds good.
Okay. So let's talk about this because this album is super interesting on how it got recorded and the history behind it. So the vocalist, Chris, the guitar player vocalist,
Yeah.
Chris, what's his name? We sound like
Chris
idiots.
DeMakes.
Yeah. DeMakes.
DeMakes.
He does a podcast and he brought
Okay.
the producer, Howard Benson, on this. Howard Benson is known for insane albums. He's like produced some of the biggest bands out at this point in time. But this was one of Howard Benson's. He got started in metal music. He kind of fell off. And this was like a comeback album for him, which is kind of weird. Are you still there with me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All of a sudden you're frozen and stuff, so I got confused. But he was one of the very first people to use Pro Tools, recorded digitally, and everything up to this point was done on tape.
Yeah.
And Sepultura was the first band to use Pro Tools. Less Than Jake was the second.
Okay.
So like
That's sick.
very early on. In addition to that, it was one of the first times that he was using auto-tune. So not only did he help to auto-tune their vocals just a little bit, not the auto-tune you hear with like Lil Wayne and stuff like that. It's just ever so slightly, but he auto-tuned the horns as well,
Oh,
which if you listen to like normal horns, compared to this, there's something a little different about them. And I think it's just the auto tune that makes them just sound so crisp, so clean. It just sounds so good.
Yeah.
So it's super interesting. I would highly recommend going and finding that episode of Krista Make's podcast with Howard Benson and just listen to them talk about this, because the way that it came together and the way that they were able to, like, when it used to be tape, you basically had to play the way you wrote the song.
Yeah.
Now he had the song and he would cut it and he would say, we're moving the bridge over here, or we're putting another chorus over here. And like all of a sudden, like their minds were blown on what they could do with writing music, all because they did Pro Tools.
That's cool.
So super interesting facts. It's incredible. And for being that early, is there a better example that Pro Tools could point to be like, this is what you can do using digital music?
Yeah. No, it's crazy. Like, dude, the only thing I've learned out of this episode, besides the history, well, it's part of the history, is just anywhere there's been like a revolution, whether it's musically or whatever, ska music has been there. I'm going to keep throwing in these little things about it, because people need to understand, like, when you are left alone in life, ska never falters. It is there for you. It is at the forefront of everything. All right. And so people just don't give enough credit.
I already brought up that reaction video. He was listening to All My Best Friends Are Metalheads. That's the song he was listening to. And he's like, if you ever see two dudes fighting on the street, run between them, stop them, turn this song on, because they ain't fighting when they're listening to this. And it's true, dude. You just like, you want to bob your head. It's just fun. It's a good message. You want to dance together, you know? It's just like party music.
I mean, I think about, do you like Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Yeah.
Gregory's like, ska defines who I am as a person, and I will never turn my back on ska.
Dude. You start skanking. Heck yeah.
So I wanted to talk about Anthem, because this is one of my other favorite albums of theirs.
Well, so next is Borders and Boundaries. And I know a lot of people don't talk about Borders and Boundaries. I love Borders and Boundaries. I think it's one of their best albums. We don't have to talk about it a lot, but one thing I have a complaint about is I looked up album rankings, and Hard Times did a ranking, and they said the song you can skip on this album is Mr. Chevy Celebrity. And I want to throw two middle fingers up to Hard Times, because Mr. Chevy Celebrity is one of the best Less Than Jake songs ever. This was like, being in my stupid little 9-year-old head, the swearing involved, the kick rocks, throw rocks in the neighbor's window. As like a little 9-year-old, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go break a window. Like, that's just awesome, you know?
Yeah.
This album is great.
Yeah. It's funny going back and listening to, because again, I think Hello Rockview and Anthem for me were like on the forefront of them, but going back and, trying to listen through some of these other albums, you start thinking all the songs you remember from the albums, like Borders and Boundaries, even some of their older stuff, like some of the songs off of Pezcore. And I don't even know, like this album came out in like 95 or whatever, 96. Like there's no way I was listening to this when I was that old, but I'd know songs from it. So
yeah, exactly.
The
one thing about Borders and Boundaries being between Hello Rockview and Anthem is I feel like a lot more rock influence. This is where rock started to creep in. And so, because Anthem is a very rock anthem heavy ska album.
Yeah.
Very sing-alongable. And I think going from Hello Rockview to Anthem would have felt very jarring. Putting Borders and Boundaries between it
is good.
It feels good.
It reminds me of kind of like the progression, and honestly, it's around the same time, but the progression of like the Offspring.
100%, 100%,
which is not bad. I'm not saying that as like it's bad at all. I again love all this stuff. So, I do want to talk about Anthem though. The Science of Selling Yourself Short. Also, like a top 3 ska song of all time.
Absolutely.
I actually really like Roger's vocal parts better than Chris.
I've always preferred Roger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I've
it's
always
kind of
preferred Roger.
funny too, right? Cuz like Dropkick Murphys, I prefer the guy that does the like rougher punk
Yeah,
vocals
yeah,
more
yeah.
than the guy that like, actually sings, right? But with Less Than Jake, it's kind of flipped. And maybe it's because like I do have an affinity for reggae music, and so when I listen to like Roger's vocals in like The Science of Selling Yourself Short, like I don't know, it it gives off a vibe to me. Like I was joking with you that like when I was listening to this, like it finally warmed up in Texas. I had my window open, the sun was shining. Like I'm in like a short sleeve shirt, and I'm just like listening to this type of like more reggae influenced ska, and I'm like, dude, this is a vibe. Like this is the life, you know. Like I just want to sit back
Absolutely.
and just chill listening to songs like this. So
Absolutely.
that was
This
that was
song
always
so
like
good.
that was always why like I really gravitated towards Anthem as well. Is it felt more like a good album for me to like come down from. You know what I mean? Like one
Okay.
I could just chill to. So
Sure. So here's the thing about Anthem when it came out, and I think that this is what a lot of people said at that time because it was not well received,
right,
right? It's very radio rock friendly, right? You have songs like The Science of Selling Yourself Short, which in all honesty, that's as close as you will get back to the first wave of ska that Less Than Jake does.
right,
It is the island music. It's slower. It's the what you said. It's the vibe kind
yeah,
of thing. But then even the song right before, "Look What Happened." "Look What Happened" is probably my favorite song on this album.
yeah.
It's
It's a good song.
super memorable. You can sing along to it, but you could take the horns out of there, and that's just a punk rock song.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's very, very accessible.
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like this album aged really well because as you get older, some people don't always want the speed. They don't always want the fast. And that's what Anthem did very well is
Yeah.
they slowed it down and they became more friendly that way is what I think.
Yeah. And I think that's why I really liked their later albums, like Sound the Alarm, Silver Linings, and Uncharted. It's just it's a calmer, vibier music for me. You know, we've talked about this with a few bands where it's like, you know, it's like being enraptured in hardcore like we are, like sometimes it's hard to come down from that, you know, because you
Sure.
don't want to like, sometimes you're like, I think you get in this mentality where like, nah, I'm too cool to listen to like not hardcore music. You know what I mean? Like, how can I be a tough guy and not listen to hardcore music? And then it's like, okay, well, I'll put ska on because that's like, you know, I'm still adjacent enough to where I feel tough, but I can come down from it. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. You
So,
know, so after that one, after Anthem, because I agree with you, Anthem is fantastic. At this point, like ranking wise, it's like Hello Rockview for me. That goes Anthem, Losing Streak, and Pezcore are number 3 together. Um, but then number 4 for me is honestly that Gainesville, Florida album,
okay.
GNV FLA.
Yeah. Uh huh.
So in with the out crowd, it's just so generic. It's just so radio rock. They tried to build off of what Anthem was, but they did not capture what Anthem captured.
Yeah.
GNVFLA gets right back to okay, we're going to put ska influence back in there, like
Right.
heavier ska influence in there. You get a
Yeah.
lot more horns. It comes right off with the city of Gainesville, a very heavy horn driven song, right to the state of Florida. It picks up the speed. It feels like
Yeah.
old
Yeah.
Less Than Jake.
Um,
This was the album that they came back to after doing their radio rock stint.
yeah. So, like, does the Lion City Still Roar?
Yeah.
Is such a good ska song
Yes.
because, like, you can definitely feel all the influences in it, right? Because like the choruses have that really cool upbeat, like almost first wave ska sound, or two tone at least ska sound, and then but the chorus goes like right into like a punk. It's really fast. There's not as much horns. It's a little more distorted. It's a good sound, man. Like they do go
Yeah.
back to their roots on this one for sure.
Yeah. So this album's great. It's an awesome album. So like if you want to start avoiding some of like the radio rock stuff, go listen to GMVFLA. It's a fantastic album. Um it's interesting that it goes from that. Then they start doing a couple EPs, right? You get a few EPs before you get up to See the Light.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, I think they've got, is it Greetings and Salutations?
Is that what it is? So
I think that's before See the Light.
yes. Yep. Uh-huh. Which that was a combination of two EPs that they had
Okay.
put out. So yeah, so that's some of like the B-side tracks. That's some of the other
Yeah.
stuff that they're probably just messing around with. Probably the stuff that didn't make it onto In With the Out Crowd because it was
Right.
too ska or too poppy as opposed to that kind of radio rock sound. It's interesting that they get to See the Light and kind of revert back to In With the Out Crowd. I didn't look this up. I don't know. It's on Fat Wreck Chords. Fat Records.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. That's the label that it's on. I don't know what this album was. Like, it's a good album, but it's pretty generic. Like, there wasn't anything that like
Yeah.
the
It's
money
probably,
is on
yeah.
the long shot. It feels like this is what it is. It feels like recycled less than Jake riffs, recycled less than Jake songs that you've already heard before. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is for me. So it's not bad, but it feels recycled. It feels like they've
Yeah.
already done it before,
I mean,
which you
they're
could say that
already,
about all their stuff, but
no, exactly. But sure. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It'd be cool to talk to these guys and just kind of understand like how they've been able to do this for so long, because like obviously not every album is going to be perfect, but like what's the thought process on writing an album like this in 2013 when you've been doing this 20 years? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like at what
It's
point, I mean, I don't know. You look at their like touring and stuff. I mean, from 1996 all the way up to 2018, they're pretty much playing 100 plus shows a year.
yeah.
Now, most of those are Warped Tour because I swear they were like kings of Warped Tour.
Sure.
But still, man, like they have a year that's like 188 concerts in 2006.
Yeah.
Like that's just insane. And so I don't know. Like you would want to blame it on burnout, but it's like, man, you guys are still like you're still playing 100 plus shows a year when this album's coming out, so you can't like necessarily. But maybe it's just got to be like the natural cycle of ska. I don't know if any of these other bands like Real Big Fish and them, none of them were pumping out albums like these guys were. Maybe the recycling comments right. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's just not as catchy. Like I'm even listening to it right now. Like Bless the Cracks. Bless the
That's the.
Cracks. It's just a generic kind of punk rock song.
I think that's the. You just said it the best way. This album is not catchy. The rest of their albums are catchy in some form, right? It's either catchy with punk influence or it's catchy with like island influence.
Yeah.
This album does not feel catchy.
This is what I would expect to hear walking into PacSun.
Yeah.
Like that's probably the best way to put it. This is something that you could be walking around the mall, it's playing in the background, and no one in the mall is going to be like, what is that song?
Yeah.
It's fine. It's easy on the ears. And it has that little bit of an edge that maybe the teenagers like, yeah, I'm going into PacSun because they're playing that music. Like that's probably like the best way that I can think to kind of describe how I feel listening to it.
Yeah. So, let's see. Then they've got I mean, I don't know, man. We don't have to like really dive into all these. I mean, we've talked a
No,
little bit
they
about
do
Sound the
sound the
Alarm.
alarm. Yeah, you said bomb drop.
Bomb
That's one of your
Drop's
favorite
such a
songs.
good song. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's the fast. This would be in a 90s style teen comedy, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's what you think of when you think of third wave ska. It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Then they go into Silver Linings. I actually have the vinyl for this. This album got delayed release because of COVID, which sucks. It's 18 songs. Well, I guess that's the deluxe edition has 18 songs, but I actually really like Silver Linings. I listen to it a lot with my kids. My son learned to skank to it.
Sick. Yeah.
Lie to Me is a great song.
Yeah.
Um, I have a lot of fun with this album. So I
Sure.
do I do get what you're saying of it kind of goes a little more mainstream, but look, man, I have no problem with the mainstream ska sound.
And
So
listen, with kids and stuff like that, I would easily put this album on and I would dance around with my kids to
yeah,
this album. You know what I mean? Like adding that level of connection will make an album like this all the better. And you
right,
do get some of that. You get more of the ska sound on this one than those other two albums, which is why I hesitated on saying this one as well.
yeah,
But it's still just not as memorable as some of those other albums, which is what you got with the other Less Than Jake albums.
yeah,
So like that's why I started to put it down that way. There's not a single thing wrong with this album
right.
though.
I think the biggest reason why I've really enjoyed this album though is because like 2022, um, I think I saw this. I think this was on Pure Noise. I think this album actually
Yeah,
released on Pure
yeah, yeah.
Noise. I was like listening to like modern ska, like things like Omnigon, Catbite, Bad Operation, stuff like that. And then it just like clicked with me like, oh, I should go see what Less Than Jake's doing. And I saw they had a new album. I was like, oh, sick. So then I just like listened to the album a ton. And so
Yeah.
it's more of just one of those things where it's like, oh, it kind of brought my love back to Less Than Jake. And maybe it's not
Okay.
the best album, but it was good enough for me to be like, man, I miss this, So,
Sure.
and then I was completely caught off guard when Uncharted dropped.
Yeah.
This is a great
Yep.
album, EP album, whatever.
Yeah, it is. It's great. Um it feels like it was just it doesn't feel as radio rock, I guess. I feel like there's some parts in it that are just a little bit different. I think that starting out with Broken Words, which is an explicit song, maybe that's part of it, right? Like there's just some lyrical content in there that kind of brings you back to that punk feel.
Right.
So, but it's
Yeah.
still heavy horns. You do get some of that stuff, but like Sunny Side Up or Sunny Side, that's a great song.
Yeah.
Uh,
Walking Pipe Bomb. Great
Walking
song.
Pipe Bomb, great song. So like they're still just putting out bangers. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they can
And
go
see, I
another
know
30 years.
probably. I know I talk crap on EPs and stuff, but if you're a band that's been around for 30 plus years, EPs are fine. We're
Sure.
good. If you want to release an EP every 1 to 2 years, we're cool, man. Like you've been around 30 years, so you can do EPs. I just want to keep listening to Less Than Jake.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been really cool listening to this band and thinking about them because I remember going to stupid junior high dances and like asking the DJ to play Less Than Jake so that we could skank.
Yep.
I remember
Yep.
going to like the park when they did some of those like festivals that we were throwing,
Yep.
and there were ska bands and we were skanking. I remember
Yep.
going to like the U, right? Didn't they play one of the Red Fests?
I don't
Or
remember.
no, it was Tiger Army.
But
Never mind.
I remember learning how to skank though, and then that translated to Tiger Army. We would
Yeah,
skank for Tiger Army,
yeah,
you know? So like
yeah, dude. I
this
remember
was
like
the introduction to a lot of that rockabilly, psychobilly type of
yeah,
sound as well, which again, ska,
I
bro.
just I just remember going to like Warp Tour and like we were moshing like super hard for bands, and then we were sprinting to Less Than Jake to skank to them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like it's just, I don't know. It's awesome. It brings back so many good memories of like us hanging out in like my basement or a friend's house and everyone skanking, like just messing around. Like it's such a like I know we talked about how the lyrics can get pretty serious, but it's definitely this type of music and Less Than Jake is like it's just a vibe. Like I just remember I keep saying that, but like I just remember all the fun times like messing around with Less Than Jake on,
100%.
because that's what it was. Like we were out skateboarding or something and we're like
Right.
dicking around, skanking and messing around with each other. But it was like very happy listening to this music because it's a very positive, upbeat music, and
Right.
so I just
Yeah.
have very fond memories of this band, and I'm glad we talked about them. So
One of the things that I said, I've been messaging a few people just because I put out there, do people listen to ska? You know what I mean? Especially with like the audience that we've targeted for the majority of this podcast, right? We've done a lot of post-hardcore, we've done a lot of hardcore and metal and stuff like that. Does the audience that we normally talk to listen to ska as well? And I was going back and forth with a few people. And the one thing I kept bringing up is like Hello Rockview is like top quality, right? You can't argue that. And they're like, absolutely. And I said, the one thing about Less Than Jake that was different than all the other ska bands for me, and you're going to be different than this because you listen to more than I do, is outside of Less Than Jake, everyone else is very single heavy for me. I listen to a lot of singles from a lot of ska bands. I don't listen to whole albums.
yeah. No,
So,
no. I mean, outside of some of the modern, like the current ska bands, so like Bad Operation is one that I listen to their whole discography
sure.
fairly often. Um, but thinking about some of the other larger ska bands that we were into, like Real Big Fish, does anybody
I
really
listen
talk
to the
about Real Big Fish outside of Sellout?
right.
Or Mighty Mighty
Or
Boss Tones with the Never Have I Knocked on Wood. I can't remember the name of that song.
or whatever the Real Big Fish, what was the Real Big Fish cover they did that was their popular one?
Oh, it's Goldfinger that
Oh,
did
no,
91
Take on
Blue.
Me. Take on Me.
Oh,
Remember
I
that?
just remember, yeah, I just
Take
remember, yeah.
on Me. Yeah. With the
I just
ska
remember
background.
Goldfinger's cover of 99 Red Balloons or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, so,
So
but no, you're right. You're
oddly,
like, that's, I mean, I was thinking about this too, that like all these other bands, like, man, like Sell Out from Real Big Fish is like top tier ska song. The one
yeah.
from Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, the Never Have I Knocked on Wood. I can't remember what the actual song name is. Incredible ska song. But like Less Than Jake has a whole discography that is just totally, like totally,
I mean,
nailed it for
not
me.
only that, Hello Rockview, it's not just like a top ska album, it is a literal top album.
Yeah.
Just in general across all genres. I love that album so much.
Yeah.
So much history, so much like reminiscing about that album. Like it is just it's so high up there for me. It's unbelievable. But oddly enough, Goldfinger is actually probably the only other like ska band that I like listen to full albums of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I actually really like Goldfinger.
Yeah, no, they're sick. They're sick. So
So
I don't know, man. This was fun. Um, I had a good time looking up the history of ska. It's super interesting. Um, there's a little bit of a revival right now. I
yeah,
wouldn't call it a fourth wave because like sonically, it seems like a lot of these bands are pulling from a lot of the older stuff. So like, I wouldn't call it a fourth wave. It's just there's a really cool revival of it right now, and there's some really cool bands, and so um, go check it out, man. People should keep giving ska a chance because it's not going anywhere, man. It's always
yeah.
going to be
No,
there.
the fourth wave is going to be ska with heavy ass breakdowns. It's going to be beat down with horns. That's the fourth wave of ska.
I don't think I'm ready for that.
Listen, you never know until you try.
It's true. Some things though just don't work, but all right.
Like, you guys are the ones who keep throwing in my face that like you put saxophone in the story so far and stuff, and it makes it god tier. I'm
It
like,
was.
you guys are crazy. So cool, man. No, I love these guys. it's incredible that they continue to do it. They are on tour actually coming through this summer. I think they're in Salt Lake in August, early August.
Dallas, yeah,
So,
end of August.
yep. So keep your eye out. If you guys are Less Than Jake fans, they're coming with a very solid current ska lineup, from my understanding.
Yeah, Catbite is on there, and you want to talk about like a current, really cool ska band, you should definitely check out Catbite. Fishbone is a super old school
Okay.
ska band. Like Fishbone probably influenced Less Than Jake.
Interesting. Okay.
So, yeah.
Sick.
I don't know much about the Suicide Machines, and maybe that's my fault. They're probably like one of the goats of ska, and I just don't know about them. So.
Actually, Suicide Machines is the 90s as well. They are very, very popular. They are more punk. They're going to probably fall into that No Effects, Rancid type of influence. So, no, you would actually probably really like the Suicide Machines. I'm actually surprised you haven't listened to them more. So,
when do they come to?
I
So
bet
they're
if
coming
you
to Dallas August 13th.
I bet if you pulled them up, that's actually a band that you would know some of their stuff.
All right.
So
I'm hoping this is, well, I guess summer. I hope my kids aren't in school. Maybe I'll take my kid to this because he likes Less Than Jake. So it'd be fun.
That'd be fun.
So
that'd be a fun first show.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let us know what you guys think. Let me know how far off I was on the history stuff, or if you even like that. If it sucked, we won't do it again. But
I mean, we're not going to do it on everything, but from time to time, if there is an interesting history and that wasn't too cringe, like, let us know. It was fun.
Thanks.
I enjoyed it. So
yeah. If it wasn't too cringe, you guys could tell it was cringe. Yeah. I hate you.
All right, man. We'll catch you next week.
See ya.